Hello and welcome along to Mondo Chelloveck Movies. My name is John, and this video is going to be a follow-up to a video I did a couple of weeks ago about what movies you can get in the UK that are released by Vinegar Syndrome in the US. So I'll leave a link to the first video down below so you can check that out if you want to. Now, the main thing about these videos is that if you're on the fence about getting a Vinegar Syndrome title and you're looking at the price of them, you're thinking, wow, that's a little bit out of my price range, and I want to go for it, but I'm not too sure what I'm going to get. You might want to look in the UK because you can find some of these movies that are available on Vinegar Syndrome at sometimes at a lot lower price and even on a better quality release. And you might want to try them here before you go to Vinegar Syndrome. So if you like some of these movies I'm going to show, I might give you a bit of a heads up on the Vinegar Syndrome titles. Now, I personally rate Vinegar Syndrome very highly. I think they've got this unique way of picking a movie which is pretty well unknown, and what they'll do is they'll do a stellar version on it. They'll put that delicious slipcover over the top, and you've got a release that's actually, it's like second to none. So on my first video, a lot of people said you'd missed quite a few titles off, and I had done. The list I was going off was quite incomplete. So I went back on the line, and I've looked at quite a few lists, and I found out there's a lot more movies on my shelves that have been released on Vinegar Syndrome, and I'll take you through them now. I've got a handful here. There'll be a few more videos on this subject, I would imagine, and I'll just give you a bit of a kind of a heads up as to think if you're looking for a Vinegar Syndrome title and it's out of print or like a stupid price, you might want to go for a more acceptable UK release, which is probably half the price. So first up is Righting Wrongs. Now this set from '88, I don't know if it's still in print. I think it is. It's come up just recently, and if it has gone out of print, you will still be able to get this one on a standard release. This movie is absolutely brilliant. It's got a stellar cast. It's got Ewan Bew, Cynthia Rothrock, and Michelle Yeoh. It's got every single thing you could ever want in a sort of martial arts action movie from the middle '80s. And I think this is Cynthia Rothrock's first action movie in Asia, and she is unbelievable. Her skills are immense. Can't wait to get some more stuff by her. This movie here, this release here, has got everything they can want in it. It's also got, I think it's got three cuts of the movie. I mean, Deborah watched the Above the Law cut, which was great. That's one I remember from when it got released in the UK way back when on VHS, and we thoroughly enjoyed it. Now, Vinegar Syndrome have put out a sort of special edition of this movie on Blu-ray. This is Blu-ray, and more about the Vinegar Syndrome one on a different video. Next up is Psychos in Love. Now, I was going to put this in my first video, but when I thought about it, it's not a UK release. I actually got this, I think it's a Dutch release or Denmark. I got this off Amazon, I think, and it was £10. Now, this movie is on Blu-ray in Vinegar Syndrome, and I think it's really hard to get, especially with its slip. It's got a lovely slip. This movie is absolutely insane. It's one of the movies that when you were trying to get movies that were banned in the UK in the 90s, you couldn't get a hold of them. They're always talking about movies that you'll never get released in the UK, and this was always on the list, Psychos in Love, and I always wanted to see this one. And I got this a couple of years ago, and I've got to say this is just one of the most strangest, goriest, low-budget, like nonsense that you'll ever see, but it's so good. I think it breaks every sort of wall in the movies. I think there's bits where there's a killer killing somebody, he's actually looking at the camera, and the cameraman's joining in or something like that. It's just so nuts. But the basic premise of this is there's two people and they get together, but they don't know it. But each one of them is a psychopath and they're a serial killer. I don't know if this is out of print with Vinegar Syndrome. I don't know if this DVD is out of print. But this might be a good way, the only way you can get Psychos in Love, which is a brilliant movie. I would love it to get released in the UK. I don't know if it will. It is really gory, but I think it's so badly done it might get away with it. It might get this just really crazy film. It might get released in the UK. I would love it to get released. But that's a highly recommended non-UK release. That's Psychos in Love. Next up is Death Wish 2. Now, this is the Australian release, actually. You can't get in the UK, but it's heavily cut in the UK. This one isn't the full version, as far as I know. I think there is more in the Vinegar Syndrome one. I think that's the total uncut one. I think it's in 4K as well, would you believe? But this is for me, is the best Death Wish movie by a country mile. It's just absolutely brilliant. You get Death Wish 3 on here as well. Now, this one, you probably, if you wanted it and you wanted to get like the fullest version that you can get apart from Vinegar Syndrome, I think you might want to get this umbrella version, and you also get Death Wish 3 as well. if you want to get a more uncut one than you will do in the UK. It's a shame that they are uncut in the UK, but Death Wish 1 isn't, but this one is, and this one is really brutal. And I would imagine if this one's bad, if the one that's got more stuff on would be really over the top, and it would never ever get past in the UK. So that's a good one to keep an eye on. If you love this film like I do, you might want to think, I will go for the Vinegar Syndrome, which I believe has the fullest uncut version of this movie. So that's Death Wish 2. Next up is the Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2. This is the Amazing Arrow edition, and it is out on Vinegar Syndrome in 4K, and they've got a really lovely edition. Now, when I first saw that, I thought, you know what it is? I love this edition. I never get rid of this edition, but I love it so much. This movie is quite grainy, it's quite gritty. I like it like that. And is it worth getting on the 4K? I don't really know that yet. And I think the 4K may be literally out of print at this point. They go out of print so quick, Vinegar Syndrome. So I have got this movie, and I do think this is a really good edition, if you can still get it, but you can't get this version anymore. But you will be able to get the standard edition. And is it one of the ones I will look into it more? But what I'm talking about this one is I think that hopefully it might come out in 4K in the UK, like Second Sight when they've done Texas Chainsaw Massacre 1, which have done this amazing version on. Maybe they might do the same with their Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2, hopefully. It might be a thing, it might be just me, just a bit of pipe dream of mine. I've just got a hunch for some reason that the UK will release a 4K of this version. But if you're looking at that Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2, this one is a solid one from Arrow. So that's the Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2. Next up is a real favourite of mine, Dead Heat. This is a buddy cop movie with Joe Piscopo and Treat Williams. And Treat Williams there becomes a zombie. And it's all about him sort of deteriorating. And Joe Piscopo's got to try and find him an antidote. Wow. And it's 88 have released this. And this is a great Blu-ray. But I've got a feeling because on Vinegar Syndrome they released it in 4K. They've done, a stellar version of it. Now I'm thinking because 88 are quite like sort of in fellowship with Vinegar Syndrome to a certain extent, I do think that this will come out in 4K in the UK somehow. I know that this is really a movie that doesn't get talked about that much. It's a great movie. And is it the fact that Vinegar Syndrome seem to be able to release anything they want to? And sometimes maybe in the UK they can't release that much stuff because they don't know if it's going to be successful or not. Now this one here, I think it's a great film, but I don't know if it's one of those ones that it's kind of they're just going to leave it on Blu-ray in the UK because they're not going to like go to the 4K level. But saying that, 88 are putting out some strange versions on 4K of movies, so that's I think anything's fair game. But this is a great movie. It's got loads of special features on, and it's one of those great 80s movies that nobody really talks about. So that's Dead Heat. Next up is an actual Vinegar Syndrome title. It is Nothing Underneath and Too Beautiful to Die. Two movies on one disc. These are Blu-rays. I've watched this one. What a great film this is. It's got a stupendous print on it. It's absolutely amazing. I can't wait to watch this one. They're kind of like latter-day giallos with a twist. Now, these have both been released, I think, by Nucleus Films in the UK. So it shows you that maybe if you wanted to get this on Vinegar Syndrome, you can't get it. You could go to the UK and you could actually buy it in the UK. Now, the two, they're actually they're online. You can get them. They're not cheap at the moment. Hopefully, they'll come down in the sale. Nucleus don't seem to do sales very much, unfortunately. But I can highly recommend this one. And this might be one that if you're looking for these two movies, they're all separate, unfortunately. They're not two on one disc like this one is. But if you're a fan of them and you like that type of movie and you don't want to actually pay for the two of them separately, which will come about 30 quid, you might want to get this one, which is just as good for maybe a little bit less if you can get it at a sale or maybe cheap online. So that's a bit of a sort of alternative heads up to say, look, we have got this in the UK, these two movies, but you might be better off finding out the Vinegar Syndrome one if it's got in a sale or on eBay. You might save yourself a couple of quid that way. So that's Nothing Underneath and Too Beautiful to Die. Next up is Crossy. This is on the Slasher Collection. It is Spy number 21 from 1983. This is directed by Uli Lommel, who directed The Bogeyman from 1980. And this does actually star the girl who was from The Bogeyman. And this is quite a strange movie because it's set in the UK. This, I don't know if this is you able to get this one. I think you still are. And yes, it's a great movie actually. And I would think that I have heard that the Vinegar Syndrome one is better. So this movie is released as Olivia by Vinegar Syndrome and has an absolutely amazing slipcover on as well. One of the best slipcovers. It would be an instant double dip for me if I could get my hands on it, just really for the cover. Absolutely brilliant. So that's Crossy. Next up is Dark Room. Now this was released on 88 and it is spine number 48 from 1989 in the Slasher Classics collection. This is a good little movie, actually. I think it's by this killer who goes around filming people or photographing them, and he actually gets the photographs, he gets them developed and stuff like that. So it's quite a gruesome movie, and it's one of those movies that like a really latter day slasher. It's one on the very end of the slasher sort of run. It's a decent movie. And it was one of those ones where it's strange when you see the Vinegar Syndrome titles released and you go, wow, they've got this one on it. There's a lot of them that you get actually from 88 and especially, and you think, I never knew this was a Vinegar Syndrome title. And also, if you are trying to save yourself a bit of money in this one, I've seen this one quite cheap in CEX recently with the slipcover on. You might want to pick some of these up and it may save you a few quid down the line. And this one is quite one of those ones that it's a good movie. It's a decent movie. It's not a great movie, but it's a one that you might want to maybe get in the UK as opposed to getting a really good special edition of it in Vinegar Syndrome, money. It's also produced by Nico Mastorakis, who directed The Island of Death, the video nasty, which is absolutely nuts to say the least. Yeah, not a bad one. Like I say, you can pick this up quite cheap, and it's not going to set the world on fire, but it's a decent movie. So that's Dark Room. And last up is Censor. Now, this is one of the rare ones where I would say get this one, don't get the Vinegar Syndrome release, which is a good release. But this is it's from Second Sight. It's one of their special editions. It's absolutely incredible. It's everything you could want for a box set. It's got a whole lot in there. So for me, if you're on the fence with this one, I would urge you to get this one over the Vinegar Syndrome one because this is just the best package. I know this is out of print now, but you may be able to get this second hand. This movie's a strange movie, actually. It deals with the censorship of the video nasties. It's a great movie. It's got some strange twists and turns in it. And also, it's got a really odd ending, which I'll just leave it at that. But I personally like the ending. But some people can say it didn't really end, but it does kind of end, if that makes any sense. But it's a great movie, and I tell you what, if it shows up, it's got some amazing special features on here, all to do with video nasties. And basically, you're getting two things for the price of one. You're getting the movie, and you're also getting all the extra features, which would tell you everything you would ever want to know about video nasties. And I think this is really good, and it really captures the sort of air of 1983, 84, when this thing was going about, and it was just absolutely crazy. Everybody knows who lived through that. And yeah, so you can get the standard version of this one, get this quite cheap in a sale. But if you can't get it, I urge you to get this one because this is one of the best special editions I've seen. It's just absolutely incredible, as Second Sight always does. So hopefully this video has helped you out in some way and give you some ideas if you want to go hunting for Vinegar Syndrome titles or you want to save yourself a little bit of money and get these ones from the UK. So, thanks for watching, you take care, and I will see you on the next video. Cheers.